Well, hey, welcome to the X Podcast. I am here with my friends Zach and Tim. How are we doing today?
Doing great.
I'm good. I'm good.
Are you?
Yes, sir.
This is an exciting time for you.
It is an exciting time.
Scary Faith around the corner.
Scary Faith. Boo.
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 Boo. It is. Can we talk about it? I mean, we can talk about it. We have something coming in the works to further dive into it, but you have an exciting launch coming up here soon, and we're going to be talking all about it. But anything new? What's going on in your life?
Nothing crazy.
You went to Lowe's the other night.
Went to the Home Depot.
Home Depot the other night. That was an exciting
Working
night.
on the bathroom.
Working on the bathroom. Okay. There's a lot going on in the world. We are...
Nice pivot.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on. There's a lot going on in the world. There is a lot going on in the world
Several things. We are entering the third month of Ukraine-Russia conflict.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the talk
I'm really surprised that it's still where it is right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's
I
crazy.
thought it would have either escalated or Russia would have.
Well, the rhetoric is escalating.
The rhetoric is
Yeah.
but we escalated to the point. I thought by now we'd have World War III, or Russia would have just defeated Ukraine.
Yeah.
I didn't see this continuing to. I mean, I did. We talked about it before. I said they could be.
Well, you
like
guys
we said,
you
it could
think
be
they
like
did for
Russia,
years.
Afghanistan. I said it could end. Well, even if Russia had overthrown,
Yeah.
I actually think there's a good chance that you would continually saw a resistance
Conflict
and you would
and
conflict,
fighting.
and it would, like I said, like Afghanistan was for
And then-
Russia. I just didn't expect that Russia wouldn't be able to actually do what they set out to do, and it's taken this long.
Have lost a quarter of their invading armies. Have lost like 9 generals,
Yeah.
high-ranking
The
officials.
Ukraine has even attacked back.
Oh,
and
attacked
they're getting
back.
supplied with more
Russian
weapons.
territory,
They've
sunk
actually
2 of their
fired.
patrol ships.
Yeah.
And but see, I heard there's some linked report of somebody that met with top Russian officials who came away believing that this conflict would be over by September 10th.
Really?
Why? I don't know why.
Picked,
but you know what's weird
they
is
picked the day
we
before
have-
September 11th. That's
know.
an interesting
We have a
date.
really important day coming up, though, May 9th. It's a really important day in Russia's history.
Yeah.
That's where the Soviet Union celebrates their victory over Nazi Germany. And so a lot of people believe that on that day,
Some big announcement.
there's going to be a big announcement. And one of the things they're
Big
zeroing in on,
announcement
a big
or
announcement.
big
It could be
attack
It
or
could be a big
big
attack. It could be
bomb
one of
or
the things
big-
they're looking at right now is could it be an official declaration of war, where Russia says, okay, we are actually officially at war, and that would allow him to draft and bring in transcripts and all that. But so
That
that's
wouldn't
going
change
on.
anything for Ukraine.
It wouldn't change anything. It wouldn't change anything for them other than as far as their military
It
campaign.
would give them power to be able to.
It would reinforce Russia's
Yeah.
lacking supplies
Yeah.
and military. But so that's going on.
That's crazy.
Then, by the way, on a very lighter note, I was wrong on one of my predictions because we
was
talked
that?
about Will Smith and Chris Rock.
Yeah.
And I kind of gave the analogy of like it was a town hall of friends, and it was and I don't ever see anything like that happening again in comedy. Not that I didn't say that. I didn't
and then it
ever see
happened
anything
with
happen.
Dave Chappelle.
And then just the other night, Dave Chappelle was attacked.
Wait a minute, I didn't
on
hear about
stage.
this.
Yes,
What
he was
happened?
Yeah,
attacked on
somebody
stage.
ran on the stage. Supposedly had a knife and a gun, and I think security got
Tackled
him
him.
and tackled him.
Whoa.
And the guy was beat up pretty bad.
The guy got beat up pretty bad. They
Yeah,
tried to attack. Do
Yes.
we even know why or the motive? I saw he was arrested and
How long has Dave Chappelle been around?
a long time.
probably 70, 80.
Should I tell the story of me
90.
running into Dave Chappelle in Yellow Springs again?
No.
No, let's move on.
no.
Okay, because there's a lot more going on in the world.
By the way,
Yes.
he not only finished his show, but then Chris Rock made a Will Smith.
Oh, he did.
So
He goes, "Was that Will
"Is that Will Smith?" I was like, so good. That's great that
Yeah.
someone can laugh about it after all
perfect.
that happened, and that's what a comedian should do.
The
So
Chris Rock revenge tour is coming.
Yeah.
at
yeah,
some
that
point.
was good.
That was perfect. And then there's something specific I want to talk about.
What's that?
Pick your brains on. But before we get there, we have to at least acknowledge these last 3 years need new vocab words because unprecedented and historic are just losing any sort of meaning.
Yeah.
But an unprecedented leak about an unprecedented decision
Yeah.
happened.
Do
the
we
other
even
night.
know where the leak came from?
No, they're starting a whole
yeah.
investigation.
But Politico came
process.
out with a leaked draft from.
Were they the first to release it?
Yes.
Was it Politico?
From the Supreme Court of what looks like it's not set in
It's an
stone,
opinion
but
piece.
most likely, Roe v. Wade will be overturned.
Yeah.
And so that was leaked.
June.
Is that when the vote or when they're going to decide?
So I think they've already voted, but they still have the chance to go back and change votes or change the language around the opinion. But they publish their opinions on the cases that they hear, and the significant ones they wait till like the end of the term, which is in this case June.
And I don't believe all of them have been released.
Correct.
Which is it? What was it? The Chief Justice that they haven't heard from?
Yeah.
Not that would be enough to overturn it, and I think that one was debatable as to where he would go.
So this is something we're going to table.
Well, it's just a significant decision. There's a lot coming out still about it. And
there's a lot politically, spiritually.
Yeah.
You have half the country that feels like this is a right we've taken for granted for 50 years, and we've just taken all these steps backwards and is angry. And then you have the other half of the country that is celebrating. This is a moral victory that we've been praying for.
Honestly, I never thought that I would see something like this in my lifetime.
Oh, I never thought this would happen.
I didn't think it was possible.
This is another false prediction on my part. I never ever
have
thought
a lot of them.
I only have two.
I just want to notice I never predicted anything about this. That's just
if you never predict anything, you can never be wrong.
Exactly.
That's true.
I just never predicted anything.
But
I
like to go. My instinct is usually pretty on, and these two things were not. So I feel confident to acknowledge them. But I never. Did you ever think Roe v. Wade would be overturned?
No. Well, and a lot has to do with precedence, which is what one of the big uproars is.
Yes.
And even some of the justices that were interviewed as they were being confirmed. And how they would respond to this particular case.
Which I read their responses. It was very diplomatic.
I thought they were very diplomatic. Most of them never said I wouldn't vote to overturn it, but most of them just said precedence is really important in the court of law, and without precedence, we don't have much to stand on as judges. So I'm actually really curious what kinds of documentation or evidence that there has to be. And I'm going to say this, there has to be something really significant. I would just assume, based on their answers, unless they were just flat out just saying that so they can get confirmed.
Right.
There has to be something really significant that they have new evidence, new something, whatever, information
it was off
that
like
would
two
lead
cases.
them to believe.
It was off like two cases, wasn't it? That they came away with this new interpretation of, well, one of them specifically said this should have never been in place because it's not constitutional. But it is interesting because, again, it's conservative victory.
Yeah.
And the Democrats probably look at like, oh, you sneakily got in a private room and overturned major opinion. And so it's going to be fascinating to watch.
I don't know what it's going to do.
All the fallout and all the things that happen. I mean, there's going to be, I think there's a lot of ramifications that are going to have to be explored.
So we're gonna have a conversation.
Yeah,
about
I think
this,
we should.
But it's a delicate.
We should dive into it.
It's important. It's also a very delicate, polarizing issue. Why don't you send us emails, your thoughts, your questions?
Yeah, I think that'd be a great one if you have thoughts and questions. Because I mean, I think coming from a faith background, as most of us do, I think most of, I don't say all, but I'd say probably a significant number of people in the faith community probably share the same. They fall on that conservative side when it comes to abortion and the taking of life. Yeah. And again, the argument is when does life begin? And that's, and a woman's right to choose. And these are, again, these are situations that have been vetted and talked about for decades and decades. Yeah. And so I think it would be kind of interesting if people wanted to submit, what's your reaction? What's your response? What are your questions? Do you have any questions or thoughts for us? And we could address them, And so if you're someone who's pro-life, it's a pretty significant day.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's something I know that I know a lot, a lot of people have been praying for this to happen.
Yeah.
And then I also know that I know people who are not pro-life. We know people, I know people who are not Christians who are, I know people who are Christians and would say they're pro-choice. And, and there's and for them it's different feelings.
Right.
And so I think one of the things we've always tried to do on this podcast is, we have opinions, and we'll be glad to express our opinions on a podcast like this and talk things out, but also to have empathy in what that means. And that doesn't necessarily mean you agree with somebody that might be different, have a different view, but to at least try to understand what is their fear, what is their concern, regarding this. Because I've also heard things like that, this becomes a slippery slope. And that affects other things. And I believe President Biden even tried to say that when he came out and said, this is going to affect LGBTQ, stuff and autonomy for individuals and their rights. And, so it's hard to wade through all of that and say, where is there political rhetoric going on here versus what are people's real fears and concerns. And so I think it is a significant move toward a decision that hasn't happened yet as the time recording this that I think will bear out pretty significant in our country.
I think empathy is the word that I would think of when I think about my first reaction. I mean, there's people on both sides.
That's your first reaction is empathy?
Yeah, there's people on both sides of this argument that's been going on for 50 years in this country. And I think no matter which side you find yourself on, you probably have a strong feeling about it. And so I know that where there's strong emotions, there's often fears, there's past hurts. Maybe there's people who have experienced this in their own life that are kind of struggling with what the ramifications could be. And so there's so much to process, and to see something that has been in some cases used as a political weapon to cut and divide. I have empathy for a lot of people who have kind of struggled with this thing. And so I know it's going to be a lot for people to process. And so,
we're going to return to this topic that is just so non-polarizing. And skip over into something that actually might be just as controversial, but we want to talk about, we've kind of offline discussed everything going on with Ron DeSantis, the so-called Don't Say Gay bill, Disney, all of those things. So a few months back, a bill is proposed that would limit
passed
in
record time.
That
a few days.
It's a really short bill, actually, but the crux of it and the part that became really controversial is the part that would limit teaching on sexual orientation for students
and gender identity
from kindergarten through third grade.
Yeah. Is it through third grade or up to? I couldn't remember.
Third grade and under.
It was third grade. No, I couldn't remember. I was reading it.
So it includes third grade.
It does include.
Yes, it includes third grade.
The bill vehemently opposed by many on the left, some would even say the far left, that it was labeled the Don't Say Gay bill.
Yeah.
To the extent to where a lot of people actually think that's what it's called, is the Don't Say Gay bill.
Yeah.
Ron DeSantis got involved, obviously, and was very angry about it. He got attacked, and again, I like to say I'm politically homeless, so take this statement for what it is, but I rarely thought I would agree with Ron DeSantis, but I actually found myself agreeing with Ron DeSantis that the bill was extremely misrepresented and was attacked on a definition of it that didn't exist, of what it was actually about. And so anyways, he, in retaliation to that, and along with the fact that now there's a lot of controversy, not really new, but Disney is continuing to advance a very progressive stance in its movies and is involved in the debate. And so Ron DeSantis, and you can fact check anything I'm saying, but from my understanding, Ron DeSantis, in retaliation, kind of a revenge tactic on Disney, signed into law a policy that would basically remove Disney's 55-year in existence tax exemption, which they pretty much were a self-governing entity was inside Florida, which who gets to do that? But and it really helped them. And so there's so much talk about number one, the bill itself. Number two, this is maybe just a sidebar, but Ron DeSantis has been attacked because the tactics he used on Disney is actually a very liberal tactic that Republicans critique. Ron DeSantis used government to attack and penalize private business, which is, again, something that is not usually in a Republican's playbook. So anyways, of course, that has just, not that Pandora's box of sexual orientation and teaching children and all of that has been the forefront over the last few years. But I think this more than ever just opened Pandora's box of, okay, how do we navigate as a society the changing landscape of our conversations around sexual identity, sexual orientation, gender identity, and how soon do we address and begin those conversations with children?
Yeah. Well, I just, my personal reaction to the bill, I would support this bill myself personally, just because I think that the challenge that we have is that we don't agree in this country. We're very divided over topics like this, variety of topics, right? We've just talked about. And I think that to me, there should be a line drawn between what the state is teaching, or let me just put it this way, there should be a responsibility and there should be the room for parents to be able to raise their kids and teach their kids, especially about something is important as gender identity and sexual orientation, especially with the way that with we're being so bombarded in culture about from every different side about these topics, these issues. And I just think that there has to come a point where we give time and space for parents. Like you could say, well, a parent could talk to a kid about these things whenever they want. Well, kids' brains haven't formed enough to be able to understand it. They're trying, we're talking about kids who are trying to learn the alphabet. They're trying to learn how to create sentences. They're trying to create, and we're going to now begin to have conversations with them in a school from teachers that have all kinds of different perspectives on the way they want to teach it. There's been all kinds of things that have come out on TikTok. There's whole sections where teachers are on there bragging about what they're so glad they're getting. They're telling these kids about, gender identity and all these things. That it's just kids aren't, to me, the simplicity of this, and I know it's so, it can be so complicated because we make it that way politically. But if you look at this, to me, I've raised kids. There's an innocence of kids that, to me, I think needs to be protected. And I don't think that that the public school systems that we pay taxes for should be dictating what is taught, especially at that age. I just think there's something about that age, to me, that there needs to be some type of protection involved, which is what the whole point of that bill was, is to say you're not allowed to. It's the whole idea of it being called a "Don't Say Gay" bill. It's not in there. It's not an attack on LGBTQ plus community. To me, it's not. I know that's not how that's being received. I've read about and all of the fear and the reaction of it. I understand that, but to me, it's about protecting parents' rights to be able to teach their kids, or to be able to have conversations with their kids, at least to a certain age, before they're going to be introduced to that at school and with other things. And so, I don't know. My reaction is I would support this bill 100%. I don't. I just think what happened is that, in order to really make this, I know everything is political, but to label it "Don't Say Gay" bill, to create the emotional reaction that people are trying to do, it is very. And to me, this is not, it wouldn't need to be. Again, I understand I have a different perspective than someone who might be gay or someone who, but for me, I would support this bill.
Yeah, I think I would agree. I think that as a father of young children, I've got 3 under 5. I've got, my oldest is getting ready to go into kindergarten this coming year. That I want the ability to speak to my children about kind of these foundational things that we all kind of orient our lives around. I want the ability to speak to my children first before anyone else would speak into that, to help create a framework for them to process and think about these things. And so I think my initial reaction would be to support the bill as well. I think it's an important conversation to have. Let's not pretend this conversation around like human sexuality and how this is played out in our culture. This has been coming for a long time. And I think up until this point, you've really seen our culture and our society become more and more progressive in the way we think about sexuality, the way we talk about it, the way we kind of view it. And so this really feels like, for the first time, the conservative movement kind of standing up and saying, no, like, here's where we're going to draw a line in the sand and say, this is where we can't go anymore.
But here's the thing, too. I mean, I think I would, again, if you're somebody who is, you know, because we had mentioned earlier, there are parents that are actually, you know, their kids are born that want to give them an ability to choose their gender identity regardless of what the biological sex is.
Like non-binary parenting.
Non-binary parent. There's things like that.
Yeah.
This bill does not say that you can't do that. This bill is just saying that the schools should not be in their teaching. That is an option, or other words. In other words,
teachers should be giving their personal opinion.
Or teaching curriculum.
So here's
the same. I'm just saying the same argument that I would not want someone teaching my kids something. I'm saying the bill enables the freedom for parents to not worry about it and to be able to do that. Even if you want to do non-binary parenting, or even if you want to tell them about gender identity and in a different way, this bill does not stop you as a parent from doing this. This just keeps the school from interfering with what you might as a parent be teaching.
And students are allowed to discuss it. Here's a quote from an actual quote from the bill, and this is the crux of it. Classroom instruction by school personnel or third parties on sexual orientation or gender identity may not occur in kindergarten through grade 3 or in a manner that is not age appropriate or developmentally appropriate for students in accordance with state standards. So students on their own want to have their own conversation. They can. And they're not telling parents what they can or cannot do. They're just saying teachers and third party that they would bring in cannot teach, cannot give instruction on this. So
isn't there also provision that if there is some sort of conversation or if a child approaches a teacher too, that teachers have to report to parents? Because like that specific part you read deals with classroom instruction, but what happens in the scenario where a kid might have some confusion or questions or would approach a teacher maybe after a class or something like that?
That's a good question.
And there was something that goes on there. Doesn't the bill say that teachers not only can't give their personal opinion in that situation, but they also have to report that to the parents, I believe, don't they?
I believe so.
That's been the part that I think
it's really but we're also
opponents
talking
of the bill have been concerned about.
Let's also keep in mind, okay, and this is what's so interesting about this kind of movement with an agenda that continues to kind of creep further and further down in age within the schools, right? We're talking about such a small percentage, okay, of not only Americans, okay, and I'm not saying it to be insensitive, but we're also, what's the likelihood? What are the odds? What are the I understand the concerns and they're wanting to create a safe space for kids, but I'm having a hard time imagining a first grader wanting to come out to their teacher. Like that kind of, again, if the school is not teaching it, then they're getting it from someplace else. Not that they wouldn't get it from other kids, or they're maybe getting that from home life. So I mean, I guess part of the concern is, and I've read this, I read up on it, you know, the concern from the LGBTQ community is that there are kids that they think may have these struggles that if they would say, they would not feel comfortable saying it to their parents, but might say it to someone at school, that for the school to have to report it could damage or hurt that kid emotionally. And they even make reference to the fact that the suicide rate is really high for kids who deal with either sexual orientation issues, especially young, or gender identity issues. And they allude to some studies, I can't verify this, that say ones that are maybe taught about it in a different way, that the number of suicide attempts go down. I don't know how significantly. Again, this is what I'm just telling you. What I read was kind of the argument of how it would hurt. But again, I keep going back to we're talking about a small percentage. That would even not only a percentage that would maybe feel something at that age or have questions at that age, but would actually maybe come out as though they're gay at first grade. Like, I mean, we're going to create a bill and a law that's going to impact every other child and what a teacher wants to teach them. That's going to bring confusion for the slight chance. Like, I understand that's a sided argument, but to me, this is what we have: a very very small percentage controlling the narrative of what is being taught to kids.
Yeah, regardless of what you believe about the fluidity of gender, sexuality. Even just bipartisan, there's a conviction for a lot of people. First off, that yes, you have a microscopic percentage of the population, especially that age, that's going to be having questions. And what you're risking is psychologically confusing and damaging kids who, for years after this age range ends, will still believe in Santa Claus.
I know.
Who's still? I saw.
They're saying they're confused. I mean, everything is make believe almost at that age, and so now you're confusing truth.
I read David Mathis. He's a theologian with Desiring God. This is like, I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago, but he gave this analogy. I don't forget what he's talking about, but basically talks about it was a father with a son on a subway, and he had a really, really, really heavy briefcase, and the son was like, "Well, can I carry it?" And he said, "One day." And he said, see, if I would have given that to my son to carry something that heavy for miles and miles and miles, that would have done deep damage. He said because he was too young to carry something so heavy.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And we've almost, as a society, done away with the thought of premature exposure. There's some things that that at a certain age, you're not ready to carry it. And there's a difference between healthy transparency between parents and kids, because we do know, like statistically, that's a healthy thing. When parents actually can apologize to their kids, when parents in an appropriate way can open up and say, hey, like, let them see their humanity in appropriate measures at appropriate ages. But there's got to be a new conversation about we are taking a briefcase that weighs 10 tons and just throwing it on the psyche of 5-year-olds, because there's a microscopic percentage of people who may one day have honest questions, and those questions need to be taken to parents and not teachers. So all that to say, I completely agree with the bill as well. I think it is the way that it was rebranded was not, it was incendiary, it was defamatory, and it was completely false. Yeah. Like I think liberals, if they have on the far left, if they have an agenda to push this, they shot themselves in the foot with how dishonest they were in the reframing of this. Yeah. And so, but the questions do remain. I mean, you brought up one. It's okay. So what about the children who don't have a healthy home life, who don't have parents that can have that conversation? What about the children? Yes. What about that microscopic percentage that does have that question? What do you say to that?
Well, that will exist. It always exists in society. It exists in culture. The question is, we're talking about policies, rules, and laws for the mass.
For the mass.
And so to me, I just think it doesn't make sense for us. And that's my argument. Yes, I think those situations exist. I would be asking those questions. What is a 5-year-old, 6-year-old being exposed to that they're even having those questions, at a young age? One of the things, and again, that is just more of a reality of, unfortunately, what our culture, what kids and people are being exposed to. It can be what parents are allowing kids to be exposed to. It can be all these different things. They're also exposed. I mean, let's face it this way too. Kids are exposed to other things at the earliest age more often than not because of other kids.
Right.
Like, the cuss words I first learned were because I heard other kids saying them. The things, you know what I mean? And so I understand that there's a reality, they're exposed to it, but I just think it's our job to do our best thing to protect. I also think that this kind of is another, we talked about precedents earlier. I think the big question is who's responsible ultimately for raising the kids,
right?
And where are we crossing a line where the state is saying, no, it's our job to educate because we don't think parents are really educating kids fairly on this. Like, to me, this is where we're crossing a line where kids don't just belong to the parents.
They belong to the state.
You know what I mean? I just think that's dangerous, a really dangerous thing. And so I think if anything, to me, that's why I agree with you. I hate the rebranding of this bill because it sounds like that it's an attack.
Yeah, it sounds hateful.
It sounds hateful. Like, oh, we're teaching kids. No, that's not at all what the bill's about. The bill is about protecting, I think in many ways, the innocence of kids to that age. And I know they're all innocent and they're exposed to different things. But I think we've also seen, and studies I believe have shown this, that early exposure to sexual things for kids in general, I'm not just saying school, I'm not applying to that in general. And I'm not even saying third grade and under. I'm saying fifth grade, sixth grade. Early exposure often leads to some really difficult things as they get older. Addictions, just kind of misbehaviors and things, even in sexually. And so I agree with you. Like, it is such a, our culture is kind of really, in the conversation, has made it very, very confusing. To be able to introduce and tell a 5-year-old, and I'm not saying they would, I'm just saying the potential is there to go, okay, I know you wear pants and I knew this, but the truth is that maybe you don't know if you're a boy or a girl, and you can decide that later.
It's damaging.
Like, to me, for a kid that for 5 years and the boys have played over here and the girls have played over here, and again, some people can make arguments about raising kids in certain ways, but I think parents should have the ultimate say. At least,
even if they want for their child to believe those things, parents have the ability to say.
And the only answer shouldn't be, well, if you want that, put your kids in a private school. Well, my taxes go to pay for the school system, and so in many ways, I think we should. It's just about really what line is being crossed.
Yeah, I think when you're making policies that affect people, in reference to your point, it affects. The policies that a government makes affects everyone, and so when we're talking about these small percentages, but I think we also can't ignore the human factor. I mean, there are stories, there are moments where this is the case, and to that, the people who would be concerned about that, I'd say, well, are schools, is that the only entity that exists that can provide a place for kids to have these conversations, or for things to be taught like in that way? There's other organizations. Church is one. We're in a faith context, obviously. There's other things, or there's other opportunities, I think, to give children an opportunity if you're concerned about them not having a good home life. I think there's other places and other moments where you can begin to...
That's why there are churches and youth groups and YMCAs.
For conversations like that to be had. And so the question is how are we involving our children in those types of organizations? And in those
Speaking
ways.
of organizations, though, I find it really interesting that Disney, in their leadership, wanted to go toe-to-toe with the governor over this. To me, it's just, it is kind of interesting because, and it just kind of speaks more of...
Well, there was a lot of pressure.
There is from their employees.
You read that. There's a lot of internal pressure.
I read there was a lot of internal pressure that Disney had, the CEO and the header, to basically come out and denounce this, which is fascinating because when you think about Disney, and let's be honest, Disney is maybe even there is a lot of internal pressure. We see that because of what's coming out in Disney. Let's talk about real quick just one of the big kind of stories that I think is almost, I heard maybe a reaction to the reaction from the governor was in the latest movie, Pixar movie coming out, which Disney, I believe, owns Pixar, that the Buzz Lightyear movie, I don't know what it's called. Maybe it's called Buzz Lightyear. But there was a scene of a same-sex kiss that was in this movie that I heard from, again, if I read this right, and I could get this wrong, but there was early screenings. There were people that were kind of bothered by it, that they took it out, but almost their reaction, well, if the governor is going to come at us, then we're putting that back in. I don't know if that's the case or that's the truth, but I actually think that I don't think this is a good move for Disney. There's me personally,
but you said you were surprised that Disney would do this.
Surprised.
Right?
I'm surprised that they would
come out.
would get as like vocal as they were.
But why is it?
But then I said I'm
not
not surprised because of what they put in. So
yeah, I was about to say.
I said they've been moving this direction
This has
for a
been the
long time.
narrative of our culture.
Yeah, I was going to say, Fantastic Four's not Disney, is it?
Fantastic Four.
Is it 4 Fantastic? What was the movie right before Buzz Lightyear? That came out, because I've been fielding calls of people saying, "Should I take my kids to see this?" There's some sort of.
Oh, you're talking about the
Dumbledore.
That's his Harry Potter thing. That's not
Secrets
Disney.
of Dumbledore.
That's
not Disney.
But it said it had Fantastic in there.
Beast or something. It's
Fantastic-
whatever.
The Fantastic Beasts.
Ask
and where
him.
To find
He is.
them.
He
Yes,
is.
of course you would know.
Yeah,
So, anyways, you saw the movie 9 times in theaters.
No,
and
once.
but
Yeah.
point is, it's geared more towards kids.
Well,
And so I was having people call me, should I take my kids to this?
Yeah.
Because we're dealing more and more with what is appropriate exposure, where is our culture going, what is
think
the
about
role
the
of
Netflix
parents.
thing. Do you remember the Netflix documentary that
Yes.
all the people were boycotting Netflix over last
Yeah,
year?
that was nuts.
Showing kind of like what was it? Kid
It was like-
cheerleaders that
it
were
was
something I can't remember.
sexualizing young girls.
young girls.
Yeah.
I didn't actually
Oh.
see it, but that was the one that
Now
everybody
Netflix is
was
not doing well.
Huh?
Unrelated.
No.
Netflix is not doing
They're
well.
Yeah.
tanking.
And
They
by,
are.
by the way, there are different places
Sell
for
stock,
that
sell
people
stock.
can have these conversations. Like you said, it's not at school, maybe not at church. Like you told me, like, what was the conversation? Your first conversation about kissing?
My first conversation about kissing
Oh, this was definitely a setup.
with my
Well,
mother.
it was with your principal.
No, it was not with my principal.
It was your principal for your homeschool.
For those who were listening or watching, my first principal was my mom because
That's what I
homeschooled.
mean. So
Has this been your goal?
there's nothing wrong with a principal.
talk about
That was
this.
his principal and his teacher
Yes.
and his mom
And you were able to have
teaching
a
him sex
conversation.
ed.
And I was. It was
And
a good
You're
conversation.
going to take us through it, or
No, I'm not going to.
okay.
But
So anyways, the Disney reaction thing is kind of interesting because it feels like there's this major
ask-
going back and forth thing. So Disney.
yes.
Well, okay, let's go through the timeline real quick first because I just want to make sure I'm getting this right. I don't know if you guys know it.
Yeah.
So Ron DeSantis came out and basically
The bill.
defending this bill
Yes.
and getting mad. Disney
At
CEO
first didn't say anything
Didn't
about
say
it.
anything. Then
Which
what
has
happened?
been their historical position.
Right.
They don't take positions on. They kind of market themselves as a family-friendly
That's
company.
that, again, family friendly, and the
all that sort of thing.
majority. Okay, here's a guess right now. I'm just curious, and so none of this matters. We're just talking heads, and it doesn't matter. What percentage do you think of parents who take their kids to Disney would support this bill?
Low. Oh no, excuse me. would
really?
support the bill. No. Sorry, I messed it up. Probably greater than 70%.
I bet it's really high.
Yeah.
The people who take their
Yeah,
kids
no, I
to
agree.
Disney, I bet would be like, yeah, I don't want whatever teacher, and I don't know what they believe teaching my kids and talking to them about gender fluidity at first grade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I imagine whether they're
That's
in faith
insane.
context or not. I just think majority. So to me, it's like you have this internal pressure coming from your employees.
Yes. So
Who feel very strongly about certain issues.
So Disney, came out, made a statement on it that they were opposed to the bill and they were going to do everything they could do
Yes,
to fight it and to see it.
and they have a lot of weight. I understand Disney's a big organization with a lot of money. So then that led to, I think,
So that in response to that, Ron DeSantis said, "Okay, so if that's how you are gonna." If that's how you're going to act, then I'm going to call a special session of Florida Congress, bring them all together, and we're going to
Reedy
repeal
Creek. That was the name
the
of it.
Reedy Creek Act, which basically, provided a big tax break to Disney, gave them control of the 55 acres around the Walt Disney World property.
It would,
and forces, I think Disney runs their own transportation system.
Yes,
their
their own town.
Oh, it
police,
is.
It's
It is. They have their
this
own
whole
electric.
thing.
They have their own
And
power
Mayor
companies.
Humdinger runs the political
Okay.
system.
Okay. Anyways, but I think you have to acknowledge that. I mean, what Disney has done in that area has been great for obviously Orlando.
Yeah, what do you
and
think about what Ron DeSantis did as retaliation?
So
Well-
I think, first of all,
I think the
we
price of
understand-
going
we-
to Disney is going to go through the roof.
Probably. I think I understand
$1 billion a
on a
year.
human level his response to Disney. He's trying to make a point. I think let's also add some context. He's trying to position himself to run for president in 2024. And so he's trying to
Against
score
Donald Trump?
or potentially in the primary. So he's trying to score political points. And so in an effort to score some political points while also kind of standing tough for what he believes, he called this session of Congress and repealed this thing to kind of stand up to Disney. And it really kicked off a whole firestorm, I think, amongst a conservative movement, which led to a lot of people I know. Boycotting, canceling Disney. We're talking about cancel culture. I mean, there was, for sure, and still is, a canceling of Disney going on.
Yeah. So that was some political soft pedaling around my political question, though. What do you think about Ron DeSantis? Was it right or wrong to do that?
Me personally, I think it's wrong. I think it's a using of government power to score your own political points to kind of further a thought you have over a private organization. If Disney wants to have a view that this bill is wrong,
well, was it just a view if they said that they're going to do everything in their power to stop it? I mean, they have a lot of money. They have deep pockets. They have lawyers. They have this. They can do it. So, I mean.
But you're just talking about a lobbyist at this point. We have lobbyists that exist at every level of our government. And
it's not just lobbyists. I mean, they can come after the bill. They can file lawsuits against it. They can do all kinds of stuff.
Yes, but let's not pretend that it doesn't happen on every single political issue that happens across the country.
They also receive, weird anomaly. But they are. And
I understand your point that Disney puts itself out as a family-friendly company.
But then they also receive, I mean, you can say one thing, he's using political power, but they also receive political benefit. I mean, they were getting mass tax benefit because of the amount of people they bring into the to the country. It might as well be a country, let's face it. But I mean, the amount of people that they bring in, that they were getting, it is benefit.
True. It is complex, but I do agree with you. I agree with Ron DeSantis on the bill.
Yeah.
I disagree, again, on precedent. We keep using that. That is a bad precedent that, hey, we're not for big government.
We're going to wage warfare.
But if I don't get what I want, then I will use that principle that I condemn, and I will use big government to force business to do what I want.
And let me just say this, and
it's going to raise the rates of Disney, and my wife loves Disney.
It will.
I don't know if she still loves Disney.
Here's what I'm going to say.
That's going to be
my family and I. We enjoyed.
You like Disney a little bit.
Yes, we love Disney.
No, he loves.
We enjoy Disney.
That's why
we think it's great.
You're Disney, Danny.
Yeah.
I have concerns about some of the content and some of the agenda and things where Disney is going with their movies and different things like that. However, let me just say this.
And that's where you're coming from, a Democrat.
My view is that I have control over what my children see. And so I don't play into this narrative, this fear that sometimes exists that says, oh my gosh, this big corporation, they're trying to groom my children, they're trying to do all this. Sure, they might have an agenda, but I'm in control of what my kids watch. And so for me, I know that the content I'm going to put in front of my children, I'm going to put it in front of them when they're ready to have that conversation, and we're ready to talk
and that's the point of the bill, though.
Correct.
Was to give you the control. That's why I support it.
Which is why I support it.
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of like a bad tactic to go, oh, you come out against something I do, so it's going to cost you $1 billion a year. That's probably not a really good tactic, and it's not going to create good relationships between the biggest organization in your entire state. That, by the way, does generate probably more money for that state than anything else.
Oh, 100%.
I mean, I've been to Disney many times. The amount of money that comes in to that place, sales tax and other things from purchases, it's a lot. So yeah, I don't know. It's fascinating.
Just again, speaking to that's the part I've been probably most passionate about is
Disney.
Just the fact that it seems like, in particular, the response to them. You can disagree with Disney's stance and their agenda and where they're going. And
then don't watch it.
Then don't watch it.
Don't go to Disney.
Correct.
Right?
If that's your choice, that's your choice. But it seems like there's this vitriol or this anger, almost like there's this reverse cancel culture.
It's kind of like back in the 90s when Girl Scouts, I believe it was, or was it Boy Scouts that did some stuff that was like they were allowing, I remember, I think, was it Girl Scouts? One of them, or maybe both of them together.
Well, Boy Scouts
they were going to allow,
was
it allowing like gay or something? I can't remember, homosexual boys or something. There was something. There was something. I remember in the 90s. I don't even know if that was back in the 90s. We're talking about the 90s. We're talking about the 30 years ago. But I remember that there was maybe even 80s. I remember there's a moment where the whole Christian community, again, things were so different back then. We weren't all connected by the internet and all this stuff. But I just remember my world where it was like the language was boycott.
Yeah.
Boycott.
Yeah.
And I was like, but the Girl Scout cookies, should we really boycott the Girl Scout cookies?
Let me tell you something.
Can't we boycott and not send our girls to Girl Scouts, but still buy the cookies?
There's nothing better than Thin Andy's Mints.
I get
Those aren't Girl Scouts.
Where are those from?
That's Andy's Mints.
They
sell the cookies.
Thin Mints.
Thin Mints.
Thin Mints. That's what you want.
Okay.
A cold Thin Mint, frozen Thin Mint.
Oh, those are good.
They
You
are
get
really
them cold.
Tagalongs. I just think.
Let's talk about the best.
Tagalongs.
I understand.
Let's talk about the best Girl Scout cookie, though.
Which is what?
Samoa's.
Coconut.
What's wrong with coconut?
You are the world's pickiest. Okay, fun fact for anyone listening or watching. Pastor Tim is the world's pickiest eater.
But you're not far behind. But you're not far behind.
Okay, this conversation
all week long.
Wow.
Who would ever have fish tacos? Who would ever have seafood?
This
Who would
conversation is for another time.
Okay,
People don't care about our
We'll
food
say we could do,
preferences.
raise your hand at this table if you would eat fish tacos.
100%.
Oh, you're wrong.
There's definitely
If
only
you
one
are
answer.
listening right now,
33%. Only
the
one person.
right person
Only
raised
one
their
person
hand.
raised their hand, and that would be Russ.
No.
It is-
All I was going to say was I understand that everyone who's watching might not come from a faith context, but I think when we use words like boycott, cancel, we're cutting out. I think, especially for those who would claim that Jesus is our Lord and Savior, or we follow Him, that's a really dangerous line to draw in the sand. To say, I am cutting you out. I'm not going to engage with you. I'm not saying you have to take on the world.
But we're talking about
view.
organizations
I
here.
understand.
Isn't that a little bit different? I mean, I think there's also look. I agree.
There's
I'm not
of
for
people
cancel culture, but if you don't agree with an organization or what they're doing, the only thing that you really have is to say, I'm not going to give my money to them.
Correct. Correct. But there's a lot of people who would look at people who would cancel an organization because of that and say, well, I've loved this organization my whole life and I've never had anything wrong with them. And why are you hating on an organization that I love and that has provided tons of great entertainment for me and my family? Like, what kind of message does that send to people who have that view of them? That's what I'm saying. Like, you could be alienating people.
You could, but I think you have to have convictions at some point.
I
You can't be like,
don't disagree.
You can't live in such a world where you're like, well, I can't have any convictions because anything I have a conviction about, you get mad about. I don't think we can live that way.
Yeah.
I just think, you don't have to be, I think you don't have to be a jerk about it. I think you don't have to go out and spread hate. I think you can just be like, you don't have to there and lead every kind of like online social march you can for, let's get rid of Disney and take away their land. Like, you don't have to do that to just go, you know what? I don't agree with them. I'm going to cancel my subscription to Disney Plus, and I'm not going to, you can do that. I think I just think we have to have some convictions at some point. And
I agree.
But I think there's a way to do that in a world where you aren't aggressive toward people who would hold a different view, that you would be able to show love and compassion toward people. And I heard someone say, and I loved it, I think it was Erwin McManus on the Battle Radio. We were listening, they were talking, and they talked about the same issue. And I loved what he said, like, we're fighting over whether or not we should teach our kids about gender identity and these things that kids can't even, they can't even understand. They can't, it's so confusing at the same time frame, like you said, that we're also teaching them. And most, even Christians are like, yes, Santa is real and the tooth fairy is going to bring you $1 or whatever it is. Like we're doing that at the same age. Well, good for you. But we do that at the same age, but at the same time, what I'm saying is, we're fighting over whether or not we should be teaching our young kids this instead of teaching them compassion. Yeah. Like, if you're worried about the way kids are going to be toward LGBTQ community as they get older, why not teach them more about kindness?
Yes.
Teach them more about loving people that are different than you. Teach them like why can't we make that the focus instead of I just think if we need to teach them this, just in case. It doesn't make sense to me. I understand I won't share the same opinion that others will, especially those in a different community than me. But I think, like, in the same way that you said, I just feel like as a parent, it's my right to decide what I let my kids watch, whether Disney or not. I think the same thing. It should be your parents' right to not have someone else forcing, because that's your option. And listen, you could sit there and say, well, if you don't like it, put your kid in a private school. The reality is there are a lot of people who cannot afford to put their kid in a private school.
Right.
They're paying property tax, they're paying other tax, and they're going to have to pay to do that. There are a lot of people that can't afford it. That is not a fair answer.
Yeah.
Okay? And so to me, I think that we just got to draw the line somewhere with kids, and it sounds like Florida has chosen to do it at 3rd grade, and there are other states that are following suit with these bills. So
I'm curious. I feel like there's one kind of deep underlying thought or this thing that's been happening in our culture that it's at the root of all this conversation. And you really see kind of coming out of the 60s, 70s with the sexual revolution and all the things that come from that the expression of human sexuality, the freedom to express that, it's just grown exponentially. And we kind of live in a culture that says, hey, you can do what you want, do what feels good, you can be who you want, love who you want, without any thought of the consequences. And so my question is this, and I want to hear both of your answers, is the expression of that ideology, that thought, do you think that's going to be more helpful or more harmful in the end?
The expression of what thought?
That you can kind of love who you want, you can express yourself sexually however you want, you can do that sort of thing. I mean, that's where you get some of the concerns about teaching, and I mean, all of it's rooted around this conversation that's come to the forefront in our culture.
Yeah, I think I will. And if you have something to say, I know we need to wrap up in a minute. So this may be a part 2 at some point down the line. But I would say this: I like the analogy that Andy Stanley gave one time on sex. That sex is like a fire, and Scripture uses that analogy too. Is something powerful, beautiful, and dangerous. And in the right context, you take your family out camping in the woods, and you got bricks around, and you've got a fire contained. It gives warmth, and it gives beauty, and it's protective, and it gives light, and it gives life. But you let your 4-year-old boys put sticks in the fire and run through the forest, it can burn the whole thing down. And so I think society, the more that sexuality becomes fluid and things become redefined and gender becomes fluid and restraints are violently taken off, I think society, but then also at the same time, while more and more people are grappling with different forms of brokenness and the spectrum of, I heard someone say before, like, just like anything else in our brokenness from the fall of man, our sexuality brokenness is on a pendulum. It's on a spectrum, and all of us experience it in different ways. I think with those two realities in tandem, 2 things are going to become more and more and more important for anybody that follows Jesus, really for anybody in general, and that is my anchors of truth and foundation are going to have to go deeper and deeper and deeper. In other words, for me, who designed sex? How did they design it? And in what way did they invite me to live in it for my optimal good and for the good of society? That truth is going to become more and more important as everything becomes redefined. At the same time, the other thing that's going to become more and more important is for the compassion and empathy of my heart to expand and expand and expand.
That's good.
I'm going to have to be a person who my roots continue to go deeper, but my mind and my love and my bridge building for all people becomes wider and wider and wider.
That's good.
I think those 2 things at the same time are going to need to become more and more and more important.
it's good.
Yeah. So
I think it was just segue. I think we probably definitely would like to come back and not just this bill, but I think we can probably continue a conversation. I think it's a big thing in our culture right now. Just the whole gender fluidity thing. The transgender thing is going on in schools with sports and things like that. It's definitely it's becoming a significant topic in our culture. Yeah. And I think it would probably be good to spend some time and address it, not just in the environment of that one bill or with kids. Yeah. Because I feel like even if you share, you can have a disagreement on what you believe about sexuality and gender, but you could maybe come to an agreement and go, hey, kids at a certain age, we just need to, that should be off limits, regardless of what you believe. So I think
there's a lot of Democrats say that. A lot of people that would be for that agree with everything that would be spoken about gender optionability would still say, but that conversation needs to be
between
they need to be raised by parents, not the government.
Yeah, and so I think these are, as much as they cross over, I think these are separate conversations, and I think it would probably be good for us to come back and maybe spend some time on that conversation at some point. I thought what you said was great, though. It's a fire, and and the two tandem things that are going on right now in our culture, and how what's our response. As a person of faith, I have a response, and I think it would be good to kind of flesh that out when we have more time. But
sounds good.
Anyways, well, it's good.
Very good. Yep.
Yeah.
Chris Hodges says that truth without grace is mean. Yeah. Grace without truth is meaningless. Truth and grace bring good medicine. And we have a whole lot of things in our world that need a really good, winsome marrying of truth and grace. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know if this conversation helped anybody, but it is. These are just topics that are just good to talk about. Yeah. And so send us any thoughts you have, any questions you have, any topics that we're trying. It's kind of an easy year to do podcasts because every week it feels like demands something that needs to be addressed and talked about. But send us any topic ideas you do have. And anyways, this podcast has helped you. If it has helped you, share it. As always, if you haven't subscribed yet, hit the subscribe button. And until next time, we will see you next week.